Hey guys, it's me. It's been a while since I've done a video because I haven't even shaved yet, I usually do that before I do a video. Anyway, I wanted to explain, basically apologize about the fact that, I haven't done any videos within the last week or so, excluding vlogs. It's just every time I say I'm going to do one on this day, it gets delayed to another day or even a week, depending on how long it takes. Sometimes, I think we've all been there. I think we said we're gonna pin a date where we're gonna be finished or something, but something just pops up or you procrastinate and stuff. So again, I apologize, and I hope this video really makes up for that. And I gotta hurry up these videos because not only is Halloween coming around pretty soon, well, within next month, I am almost close to my 100th Creepypasta video, and I want to do another week-long thing. Unlike last year, which took me a month and nearly 2 months just to get completed, and within that time, I didn't even get other videos done besides gaming and like 2 gaming pastas, I think. No wait, it was a gaming pasta and a TV review, but yeah, I mean, I didn't really get anything else done because these pastas take so long to get done nowadays, especially since I am about to get a job soon and college is getting in the way, and a bunch of other things, so I am still doing my best to, especially with the free time I have, to really focus on these videos. So, that's pretty much it. Enjoy my Creepypasta Reboot number 2 video. Alright, I think it's time for me to do another one of those Reboot videos where I talk about some of the first few videos from late 2013. Well, this was my first Creepypasta I ever did, and looking back, I still think it's pretty good. I made this in time for the 10th season of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, or Aqua TV show for that matter. This story has become very popular with other theories online, so much so that Knack Time did a discussion on my theory pasta. It makes me happy that others know my story, so I thought it'd be more than appropriate to read it again since the show just ended recently. Alright, everyone has seen Aqua Teen Hunger Force at some point. Wherever you watched the series, or saw the promos, you definitely know that the series stars 3 food characters known as Master Shake, Frylock, and Meatwad, often having the oddest adventures you could think of, like Dr. Wongburger stealing dicks to make a dick machine to get back to his home planet. They also had a neighbor next door, who was Carl, who was often less than interested in them, but seemed to be dragged into odd adventures from time to time. We all know who Carl is, or we know someone like him in real life. He was basically the stereotype of a person from New Jersey who loves to live for the day by eating fatty foods, watching football, and getting laid with prostitutes. But with this in mind, why is he so unhappy and so bitter? Let's think about it back to Carl's childhood, say around 1968. His family wasn't exactly ritzy. In fact, you couldn't even consider them to be a middle-class family. They lived in a shitty apartment, had 2 jobs, and at one point, their family ate carpet for dinner. No joke. Young Carl tried to make the best of this, often using his imagination to make any sad scenario a bit happier. You wouldn't say that Carl's parents were abusive or uncaring, but you could say that they were more strict and more truthful of the facts than other parents would be, whether that's for better or for worse. Carl still went to public school despite the low funds, but just couldn't seem to find anyone he could relate with. Many kids were often rude based on his scenario, and at times would make fun of him because of it. Carl was completely miserable, but kept it to himself because he knew that his parents didn't need the extra stress. Carl would often use his imagination whenever he was depressed because of this. Despite the fact that they were poor, Carl's family would often go out to eat at any random fast food joint that was near their apartment. While waiting in line for the food to be made, Carl was fascinated by how the food was being produced. Every time they went out to a fast food place, he would order the same thing every time: a medium shake, a large fry, and a hamburger. Oftentimes or not, he would take the buns off the burger and eat the meat by itself, and even at one point tried to roll into a ball shape, like how he saw the fry cook do it before placing it onto the grill. although not often because his parents would get annoyed at him for somewhat ruining his food. With this in mind, he always kept his favorite food in his imagination, but as if they were actual living beings in his mind. To him, they were his best friends, and typically being a kid, he also wanted more friends, so he thought up other stuff with his food pals, such as aliens, talking objects, and so on and so forth. Carl thought about what the food pals' personality should be like. In the end, all three food pals each had a characteristic of himself. The shake character had a selfish, arrogant attitude and would often do bad things. With Carl, he wasn't a horrible person, but considering that he was a kid, from time to time he would do stupid stuff, like swearing out a term and even acting a bit cocky at times. The French fry character represented Carl's intelligence, as Carl had good common sense and did pretty well at school, despite the teasing by other kids due to his overuse of using his imagination at his age. The meat character represented his innocence. Carl was a sweet kid who often mistook other people's meanings and even at times can be annoying as a result of him being so sweetly naive. As for him himself, he actually imagined himself as a balding fat man that lived next to the food pals. Carl thought it would actually be more interesting if the way he portrayed himself in his imagination was more of a jerk than friendly in real life. This probably goes back to his father's personality. Carl's father was a pretty sleazy guy. He loved fatty foods, watching football whenever it was on, and always loved to read dirty magazines in his spare time, which to a degree was a bit of an influence on him. As the years passed by, his interest in the food pals was starting to deteriorate, as Carl started to become more active with his classmates and do new things. Granted, he did average in high school, and he didn't have the best major in education, but he seemed to have an interest in computers. Around the early 80s, he worked for Atari Inc., months before the video game crash in 1983. In the months prior to that, Carl designed new characters for a new Atari game, but because the video game crash of 83 was taking effect, and with Atari becoming bankrupt, Carl was laid off in March of 1983, and said Atari 2600 game that he was working on didn't even pass the prototype stage. Gradually over time, Carl went through a major depression, becoming bitter and lonely. He started to avoid contact with his friends and his family, as he had given up on trying to better his life and settled for less. Also, over the years, Carl seemed to be very displeased with his parents and often tries not to have any contact with them, even when his mother questions him about her food and medical check not being paid. Granted, considering what Carl's gone through, he's doing pretty well for himself. He has a decent income, he's not mainly focused about his appearance, and is satisfied with receiving the basics in life. Every now and then though, his childhood thoughts of his food pals pop up in his mind, and Carl often thinks this over, as he also looks over the decisions he has made over his life. So now I bet you might be wondering how I know all of this about Carl. Well, recently, I had developed a machine that can search through the darkest depths of your brain. I found and knocked this Carl guy out and found a vast amount of interesting characters. With what Carl has thought up, I can bring these characters to life so they can buy property under my name, so when my plan unravels and they all fight each other to the death, I'll be able to inherit all their real estate in order to create the Insano Gem. I am almost done constructing my Insano Flex robot, and within a few weeks, I will be planning to sell it to Carl. And very soon, my Insano Gem will become a reality. As long as this Dr. Weird fellow isn't as wacky as Carl had imagined before. I remember this being my first story I did after my severe illness between late October and late December. Now while this story doesn't hold up the same way it did when I first read it, it's still pretty chilling and it's pretty interesting given the actual issues that happened during the production of Toy Story. But let's be realistic though, if someone had died during production the way the story had presented it, I'm pretty sure that Disney would have shut down the movie altogether. But nevertheless, I still think this is a pretty good read. The early stages of production on the film Toy Story were a complete nightmare. The production was in a sort of development hell until the infamous Black Friday incident. Disney harassed the then new animation studio Pixar constantly. They were to produce and release the film, and they wanted results as quickly as possible. Disney tried everything to eliminate Pixar's efforts to deviate from the Disney formula, even at times threatening to shut the production down. Disney sent notes on revisions that they thought would improve the film. They insisted through the notes, which all read, "Edge. The film needs more edge." The people working on the film at the time struggled so hard to maintain all of Disney's notes and demands. Once a week, they were required to fly across the country to the Disney offices to present them with progress. Every time, they were met with the same response: "Edge. The film needs more edge." Pixar revised the film so hard to meet the deadlines that it resulted in some rather interesting changes. In order to achieve edge, the film became quite a lot darker. Woody became a wildly unlikable character, much more angry and far less comedic than in the final film. Bo Peep's role in the story was far more prevalent, often flirtatious towards the male characters, and is the first to accuse Woody of pushing Buzz out of the window. Buzz Lightyear was referred to at this point in production as Lunar Larry. He highly resembles more of an older superhero, talking in a deeper voice, and is even more deluded and ignorant of his surroundings. The other toys were relatively unchanged, save for minor aesthetic differences. Pixar employees worked literally 24/7 non-stop. Director John Lasseter joked on more than one occasion that he had the best parking space at the office because his car had moved for over 3 days. Some of the writers and storyboard artists began to suffer from chronic insomnia. A few writers reported seeing visions of Buzz and Woody tying them on the lack of progress, chanting, "Edge. The film needs more edge." Many of the initial writers quit due to the stress it was putting on their personal lives, much to the distress of the remaining crew. By November of 1993, there were 2 of the 5 writers left, and only one of the 3 storyboard artists. The remaining storyboard artist was named Ralph Thompson. He joined the Pixar team in the winter of 1987, working on short films such as Tin Toy and Knick Knack. He, at the same time, did some storyboard work for The Nightmare Before Christmas, with fellow artist Joe Raff. Joe came down with a serious illness and hadn't been to work in a week. Ralph worked constantly in fear of the inevitable correction by Disney. More edge, more edge. Each presentation meant another row of sleepless nights of rewriting and redrawing the same characters in the same bedroom over and over and over. It was maddening. One morning, John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, and other higher-ups at Pixar came into the office and told everybody what happened at their last meeting. Disney felt that things were not looking very good for the film and demanded that, in less than a week, they see the complete film and story reels, with massive revisions. There was a general groan and whining from the crew, and they went back to working. Ralph worked harder than all others involved. Sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning, one of the writers would walk into Ralph's office with a packet of newly written scenes, more to draw, and with more drawings meant more scratch voice work. You see, when a film is still in the writing and storyboarding stages, artists would do temporary voices for the story reels. He had Disney's vague instructions racing through his mind. More edge, edgier, more. We want results, people. Edgier. This is a business. Faster. More edge. Move on, Ray. He thought to himself this exactly. The film needed an edge. It needed to be darker, more cynical. It needed more adult humor in situations. It needed an attitude. Of course. Ralph, you goddamn retard. How couldn't you see it sooner? Edge. All those hundreds of hours bent over a desk, and all you needed was edge. Why didn't you listen sooner? He gave the film an edge. The story reels were flown over with the main crew to the head offices at Disney. The date was November 19th, 1993. Black Friday. The film was brought into the Disney screening room. The reel was about 48.5 minutes long. The movie started out as a Western-style shootout between Woody and Andy, resulting in Andy being shot down. It is revealed that this was just a game played inside of Andy's mind. The film continued on with little problems for about the first 20 minutes or so, though several gags seem off with the overall tone of the film. For example, Mr. Potato Head would pull one of his eyes out and kick them under Bo Peep's dress for a look-see. There were several scenes of Woody yelling at the toys to stop caring about Buzz and to pay attention to him, accumulating insults and minor acts of violence. The scene comes where Andy can only take one toy to Pizza Planet, and Woody pushes Buzz out the window. You see, Woody offers to shake hands with Buzz, only to throw him out of the window. There is a stark smashing noise. The other toys are shocked and antagonize Woody for what he has done. Woody shows little remorse and screams at Slinky Dog to make the other toys stop harassing him. After much yelling, one of the Green Army men say the word goddamn. The toys grab Woody and toss him out the window as well. He falls onto the ground with a low thump. Cheering is heard from the interior of the house. The quality of the storyboards becomes much less refined and almost like chicken scratch. Woody gets up and sees Buzz. Buzz's body shattered on impact. His arms and legs were broken off and located only a few inches away. There was a large crack down the middle of his chest, revealing a mess of buttons and wires inside. He gave off a sort of electrical twitch motion in his head. His eyes looked as if they were about to pop out of their plastic sockets. The twitching stops after a few moments, and Woody looks in fear at what he has done to Buzz and runs off. There's a jump cut to the scene where the two get stuck in a claw machine. The storyboard art is back to its normal level of quality. The machine is filled with sunglasses wearing pizzas, as opposed to the aliens in the finished movie. Buzz is completely unharmed and intact. The scene is almost verbatim to the final film. Sid, the antagonist in control of the claw, is wearing a yellow t-shirt and is smoking 3 cigarettes at once. The claw grabs Woody and Buzz, putting them into the clutches of Sid. There is another jump cut, once again returning to the chicken scratch style of artwork. The scene is inside of Sid's room. Woody looks around the room in fear. He tiptoes around the room and collapses after seeing one of Sid's mutant toys. The reel now shows unrelated test animation of the characters running. A few seconds of Buzz running in place, a few seconds of Woody running, and nearly a minute of the two running together. The footage is distorted, and Spanish text is present on the screen. There is now a shot of Woody standing in front of a black background, and the trademark Pixar ball is rolling around in the distance. The animation now is the traditional animation style of a typical 2D Disney film. Woody is completely naked, with animatronically correct features, and stares directly into the camera. His flesh begins to rot away, with the exception of his eyes, which remain intact. Woody begins to moan in a low voice. What remains of his lips curl into a smile, bits of flesh peeling off as this happens. He lifts up his decomposing arm manually and waves into the camera. His fingers dig into his eyes. Dark blood oozes out of their sockets. Woody begins to scream and growl. "Don't you want it? Don't you love it?" He digs so deep as to rip the entire top half of his head off. Woody gives a sigh of relief and begins eating the flesh off of the skull before tossing it aside. He writes the word edge on the screen with his rotting fingertips. The remaining 15 minutes of the reels were pencil scribbles accompanied by the shrill screams of a young woman. The word edge is burned to the projection screen. The screen ended in complete silence. Chairman of Disney at the time, Jeffrey Katzenberg, walked out of the screen quietly telling his colleagues, "It was notes. They were following all of the notes we were giving them." Upon returning to the Pixar offices, Writer Pete Docter found the body of Ralph Thompson in an enormous pile of paper in his office. Further analysis found that the cause of death was a heart attack brought on by a lack of sleep and stress. The papers were all storyboards and animation cells of the final coherent scene of Woody. The word edge scrawled on the back of each one. After the Black Friday screen, Disney was far less involved with the film. Pixar was given the freedom to make the film their way. The film went on to be a huge success, both critically and financially. The Black Friday incident still remains very much a mystery. There is a short bonus feature on the Toy Story Blu-ray about the incident, curiously not mentioning the more notable scenes. It can also be found on YouTube for anyone who is curious to see the whitewash history. Disney produced a short documentary to avoid discussing the incident. If you contact them about it, you will be redirected to the Blu-ray's Amazon page, if you get a response at all. I remember doing this one for Christmas time in 2013. I mean, who wouldn't want a Rankin and Bass movie with such depressing details like this? I actually still really enjoyed this story and was intrigued until the end to see what was going to happen. It's odd that this movie was made at all. Maybe it was like a personal project or something. What I was wondering was, why does watching the movie cause the viewer to go insane, and what does the term "there's a storm coming" even mean anyway? Well, I guess it's not really that important. I mean, after all, me killing raccoons and writing on the wall with the blood, I mean, that's pretty much a normal thing for me to do. What? Remember those old Rankin and Bass films that would air on television during the holiday seasons? Well, it turns out that there was a lost film that was created by the two animators, and it is believed to predate the original Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer film. The footage was said to have been discovered in an abandoned storage unit in Hollywood, which also contained rare stock footage and movie stills from the other well-known Rankin and Bass films. The Super 8 canister was labeled Reindeer, so it was automatically believed to be the original footage to be taken out of Rudolph's famed movie. Knowing that this could be a major artifact in the world of Rankin and Bass, the person who first discovered it kept it for himself, along with an old Super 8 projector. The individual, who I will keep anonymous for reasons I will explain later, viewed the footage while he or she took notes of every aspect. The following account is a combination of all noted details made about the film. The film begins with the opening title screen, seeing the original Rudolph footage. The Blizzard Guts etch out the names of those who were most noted for creating the film, including Rankin and Bass. But one detail that I have noticed, which is especially strange for a holiday film, is that there is no audio whatsoever. Not even the sound of the gales could be heard, let alone the holiday music which sets the mood. When the wind was near the moment of unveiling the title of the film, I already came to the conclusion that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was about to appear. But as the wind blew away the snow, the title Randolph the Reindeer appeared. And instead of that traditional look of the title that we fans have all come to know, the title appeared in dull block-shaped letters. I then knew at this point that I was viewing an entirely different film. But I pressed on, thinking that it was some sort of prototype version of the original Rudolph film, and that it was never finished. The snowy winds blow away to reveal an older reindeer, who I assumed to be Randolph. But the most unnerving detail about him is that his fur was completely black instead of the brownish hue given to him in the original film. We see him casually walking through the wintry forest, showing no emotions on his face. He continues to walk until he walks into two other reindeer, one of them looking similar to Fireball. One strange detail besides the reindeer being completely black is that there was no audio of the characters talking to one another. Only the sound of grainy footage could be heard, increasing the terrifying nature of the film. The two reindeer seem to be mocking Randolph, one of the few similar traits to the original film. You can clearly see the two characters laugh at him, showing more hatred with every giggle. Assuming on Randolph's face shows the pure anger he has towards the reindeer, his pupils ran bloodshot. The screen then changes to real-life footage of two reindeer brawling with each other, clashing their antlers together. At this point, I knew that this film was made by someone other than Rankin and Bass. This detail, along with the others, doesn't add up to being a joyful, happy film, but possibly a spin-off of the original Rudolph movie. The footage of the two reindeer fighting lasts for about a minute. The screen then flips back to the puppet sequence. The mangled body of the fireball-like reindeer is shown full-blown, causing me to gasp in both terror and shock. He lay there on the blood-stained snow, his entrails laying beside him. The image stayed this way for about a minute until it changed to the next scene. It was then that I came to the shocking conclusion that Randolph had viciously mauled the one reindeer while the second one fled away in terror. The next scene shows Santa's castle, which was done in black and gray colors instead of the well-known pinkish shades. The screen then fades out to Santa and Mrs. Claus in the dining room area. Both were wearing black colored versions of their original suits, Santa's being the trousers and suspenders, and Mrs. Claus with her dress and apron. At this point, audio returns to the footage, and we hear the two arguing about Christmas-related problems. Mrs. Claus spoke with an irritable tone, as if she were angry with Santa about something. Santa's responses came out in a depressed manner, dragging out some words in a gloomy fashion. The audio is once again lost, and the quality of the footage goes from mediocre to absolute crap. The scene stays on Santa and Mrs. Claus, but the two puppets are not animated to the footage. It looks as if the animators were just holding the puppets, moving them around in a childish manner. In some scenes, the fingers or hands of the animators can be seen for a split second. The scene goes to Randolph strolling through the forest, but in the opposite direction as opposed to the beginning of the film. Blood can be seen trickling off from his antlers as he leaves bloody hoof tracks in his gait. This scene seems to repeat itself, as if the scene footage was used over and over again until the scene changed. But one thing I have noticed is that there is no sign of any of the forest critters from the original film. Rabbits, seals, raccoons, and even birds cannot be seen. It wasn't until a few seconds into the sequence when I noticed what was lying in the snow as Randolph continues walking. As he walks by, the carcasses of birds, rabbits, and raccoons lie in the snow beside him. The most disturbing detail about this is that the bodies appear to have been eaten by something other than an animal. Randolph continues to walk, not stopping even once to notice the bodies beside him. But before the scene changes, I noticed something lying next to the last body on the screen. I rewound the footage and nearly vomited. Lying next to the carcass of the rabbit was a knife and fork, both covered in crimson red blood. The scene fades out to the elf workshop, filled with busy elves building toys. A faint bell could be heard, and the elves begin to exit the room. We see Hermie about to stand up, but is immediately assaulted by the head elf. He begins screaming at Hermie, but the audio is gone, so all you can make out was the character's mouth words. One strange aspect about the head elf is that he looks more primitive, with a shaggy beard and tattered clothes. Hermie sported worn-out clothing as well, and both characters seem to have large scars on the cheeks and hands. At first, I was confused about this detail, thinking that there were errors on the sculpture of the faces. But I then came to a conclusion that sent shivers down my spine. Santa has forced the elves to work non-stop on the toys, and any disobedient elves were whipped. The head elf finished his conversation with Hermie and walks out of the workshop. Hermie is now alone, a single light shining above his head. For a few seconds, he simply stares at the toy train he had been working on before. He then reaches over and grabs a mallet and proceeds to strike the train repeatedly. The scene stays on Hermie as he emotionlessly smashes the train. The camera then zooms in on the train, which has now been reduced to a pile of wooden splinters. Then the scene fades out. We now see Randolph sitting in his cave next to a cardboard box. He simply stares at the opposite wall for a good 5 minutes, blinking. There is no sign of his parents. I can only expect something bad to happen, seeing the nature of this film. I then froze in front of the screen when Randolph picks up a revolver from out of the box. He slowly puts the gun under his chin and pulls back the hammer. The scene changes before he can pull the trigger. A title card appears on the screen, stating 4 months later, and we see a large group of elves and reindeer. All elves are wearing black elf uniforms, and we see a coffin in front of the crowd, containing Randolph. The most eerie aspect about him is that he shows no signs of decomposition. It's as if he had died the day before. Elves then line up, and they begin to say their farewells to Randolph. After a few elves pass by, a female reindeer comes up to the coffin and places a blood-soaked antler next to his casket. I assume that she was Fireball's mother, who still grieves over the death of her son. Santa and Mrs. Claus come next, then the head elf, leaving Hermie for last. He steps out to the coffin and begins to say farewell. Near the end of his statement, Audio returns to the film. He then bends over the casket and whispers, "There's a storm coming," into Randolph's ear before walking away. The last few seconds of the scene show a zoom in of Randolph's face, which still has a massive hole in the head from where the bullet exited. Then the film ends. Authorities later found the person his or her home, who apparently had gone mentally ill upon viewing the movie. In addition, the phrase, "there's a storm coming," was found written in blood on several walls in the house, and the body of a raccoon was discovered in the individual's bedroom. The actual film itself mysteriously disappeared after its first viewing. To this day, the authorities and psychologists are still unsure what caused the person's symptoms, or more important, watching it in its entirety. I have this single warning for all of those who are reading this. If you happen to find a copy of this film, or the actual reel itself, do not under any circumstances watch it, in hopes to save anyone else from viewing it. As for now, we can only hope that this film is never discovered again. If it is found, however, I can only hope that the individual has read this warning beforehand and will destroy the film out of fear and safety. But if you choose not to heed my warning, then, well, just don't. Rumors start to spread that the Lost Frankenbass film causes viewers to go insane upon watching it, but it's already too late for you. With Aqua Teen Hunger Force finally in its 15-year run, I thought it'd be appropriate to review what is oddly my most disliked video on my channel. I'm guessing that's most likely due to poor reading and probably the fact that I overliked this particular story. Overall, I still do like it, I still feel a bit chill by certain parts, but now I can see more of the cliches. What the hell did I just watch? In all sincerity, who or what in God's forbidden name would be driven to create such a sick and twisted monstrosity? Nothing could honestly ruin something for you any worse than this did for me. 2 days ago, I was looking on eBay for seasons of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. I was specifically looking for the second one since I own most of the others. Now, I'm the type of person who likes to conserve my money, so I was trying to find a season for really cheap. However, I was unable to find one for under 20 bucks, so I gave up on searching. I asked a friend if he knew of any good sites that sold cheap TV episodes similar to eBay. He then asked, "Why would we be searching for cheap movies when you can just torrent them off the Pirate Bay?" as he chuckled to himself. I then said to myself, why not? So we hung up, and I looked up the episode on Pirate Bay. I scrolled through the choices, checking the comments to see if the torrents were legitimate. All I saw were a handful of comments in each link saying something similar to, "Do not download this. It contains a System 32 virus which took me forever to delete," and other things like that. After a while of being bored searching through the torrents, I saw one with no comments. It was called this. I know that's a bad idea to download things with unclear contents, but honestly, I was sick of looking all over. It's just a show. Why the hell does this have to be so difficult? So I began downloading the torrent. Oddly enough, it reached 100% at a much faster time than my downloads normally take to complete. So I unsaved the folder and ripped it to my DVDs folder. I then opened up my documents to click the folder, but I couldn't find it. I felt confused. Quickly, I found out that the DVD folder was strangely renamed to What, which threw me off because files aren't allowed to contain question marks. Not to mention that the file was somehow renamed without my command. Remaining unworried, I opened the folder and there the file was named, well, like I showed you guys before. I clicked it and Windows Media Player came up. I pressed full screen and started watching. The WB logo appeared along with the piano music. However, the music sounded abnormally different. It sounds slightly distorted and off-key as if it were being played at a slower speed. The last holy note of the music proved my thoughts right. It definitely was off-key. This aggravated me, making me think, wonderful. It's glitched. Instantly, the menu popped up. What I saw took me by surprise and sent chills down my spine. Remember the DVD case of the 3rd season of Aqua Teen Hunger Force? The disturbing, creepy cartoon depictions of Meatwad, Shake, and Rylok killing things with insane, lunatic facial details? That was exactly what the menu was. It appeared with a sudden sound. The same noise you would hear from plugging something into a large speaker while it was still on. I didn't know if it was the brightness of my laptop, or the fact that their faces were illuminated due to the video quality, but the faces sent a chilling chill of fear from my neck down to my feet. The menu choices were Play All, Episodes, and Setup. Wanting to get the menacing look of the characters off the screen as soon as possible, I clicked Play All. I considered closing and deleting it, but I decided to just let it play. The screen went black with a softer sound. It stayed like that for 10 seconds. I was about to check what the deal was when the intro came and took me by surprise. Instead of a Dr. Weird interlude, or even the beginning drumbeat of the song, it just started piercing loud with "My name is..." Again, surprising the hell out of me. Nevertheless, I was relieved that the sound wasn't distorted this time. The intro seemed normal. Almost normal. Until Meatwad transformed into what looked like a tombstone with dirt covering instead of an igloo. I didn't notice it too well because I wasn't going to pay a lot of attention to an intro that I've seen 100 times already. But from what I also think I saw, Meatwad's face wasn't his typical toothy smile. It was his face of displeasure and dislike, the same one he gets when Shake breaks one of his toys. That sad, depressed look. Shake's face seemed blank and completely expressionless. He showed less expression than his typical bored face. Rylok's expressions remained normal. The rest of the intro played out just fine. However, when it ended, a strange negative stag-like image flashed on screen with the sound of stag. Then the episode played. I don't know what the hell that was, but from how much I couldn't pick from it, it wasn't something I would like to see at 2 AM alone in my room. The episode playing was the one with the snake. Shake brought in a large cardboard box, claiming to be for Meatwad. The episode was playing normally until one thing really set me off. The box said Campbell on it. I know I don't remember this episode very distinctly from when I saw it a long time ago on Adult Swim, but that box definitely did not say that at the time. I got a strange vibe coming from this episode, making me feel uncomfortable. I kept watching. Everything seemed normal besides the strange, creepy vibe from the cardboard box, the off-tune Warner Bros. Intro, the sudden star of the episode, and that fucking main menu screen. Then at the part where the snake was sinking his teeth into Meatwad, the screen went blank. I checked the timestamp and wondered what the hell was wrong with this file. After about 26 seconds, it cut to the part where the snake had swallowed Meatwad and Shake. You could clearly see the outlines of the bodies bulging from the snake's belly. Here's the creepiest part. In the normal episode, I remember Shake and Meatwad just being in a regular standing position while inside the snake. This time, Shake's pose was crooked and looked very awkward. He was bent backwards like his spine was fractured. There was something about it that made it seem like someone or something broke it by force. Myuu was in the shape of what seemed like a chubby baby infant slightly turned over from a sitting up position. Very displeasing to look at. I pushed on, thinking that this episode could not get any stranger. Then he said something very muffled and strange. I was hardly able to somewhat make it out. It sounded like, "Get the camera so we can post this on the internet when Baby Wad gets rotted by stomach acid." I didn't think Shake would ever say something like this. Hell, I don't think that a joke like that would be allowed on Metalocalypse or Family Guy. The way it was delivered came off as very morbid and devilish, as if he wanted pain and misery more than anything. Shake always loves making Meatwad miserable and tormenting him, but he only does that to rag on him, not to make him suffer. I realized I was feeling too sympathetic for Meatwad. It's just a cartoon character, right? Who cares, it's not even real. I continued watching the episode. Rylok informed Shake and Meatwad that he was going to laser the snake to get him out. But then in the middle of Frylock's eyes lighting up and zapping the snake, it cut to black with the sound again. I waited for about 30 seconds while checking my phone. I looked up, and just as I was about to skip ahead, the laptop lit up so fast it startled me. Frylock screamed at the top of his lungs.
Oh God, what have I done?
The sound blared out of my speaker so violently that it felt like it was causing a violent rumbling impact upon my spine, making me jolt and spaz in panic and fear. There was Frylock's face. His face was very closely detailed, like some of the faces in SpongeBob. His eyes were opened up so wide that his eyes were almost popping out of the sockets. Veins in his forehead were very visible, with blood coursing through them. His teeth were sharp and crooked despite his braces, which amplified the disgusting nature of them. And his eyes were shocking, menacing, demonic, insane, and ridden with psychotic lunacy. All of his veins were popping out in blood red. The bottom half was bloodshot, turning from a dark red to a sudden distinct red, where his maniac pupils were. He had red irises. They seemed to be flowing with blood. Gore was splattered all over his face. Pieces of Shake, who for some reason had human innards, in meanwhile were slowly sliding off. The remains of them were covering the walls behind him. Blood, guts, and ruptured organ tissue stained the walls in a catastrophic bloodbath. The walls were smeared with nothing but bodily bits. It wasn't just the gore that was traumatizing to look at, it was Frylock's face. He stared deep into my soul and past it. His face was unbearable to look at. I jumped back and fell off my bed in one motion. I was breathing heavily and my heart was skipping beats. Looking up, something about the laptop made it seem like it turned to face Frylock directly at me during the fall. At a moment of disbelief and fear, adrenaline rushed throughout my whole body, and I leapt up to my laptop and shut it. The sound still kept blaring out of the speakers. The whole time, I could hear Frylock's voice screaming and wailing, "What have I done? I've killed them all!" In false hope of doing anything, I slammed down on my laptop, trying to get it to shut up. While shivering with a tingling numb feeling throughout me, I turned the laptop to take out the battery, and Frylock continued to wail even though my battery was out. Eventually, it halted to a sudden stop. The creepiest feeling coursed throughout my body, throwing my mind to a state of insanity and fright. I was breathing very heavily, hyperventilating so loudly that the noise was echoing throughout my room. My eyes must have widened like a madman. It took me a good 15 minutes to collect myself and wonder what the hell was going on. After a good hour of calming down at the slightest amount, I decided to reboot my laptop to delete the file. I pressed the button and the laptop began firing up. The Windows was not shut down properly menu showed up. I resumed Windows normally. Immediately, the same pattern of gore stains I previously saw faintly appeared on my screen. Same layout, same exact pattern. I was scared. I assumed that the brightness of the blood showing up burned to my screen. I was pissed, but more scared than anything. When the desktop loaded, the gore was much more visible. It looked as if somebody literally blew their brains out all over my screen. The worst thing about it was that the blood and guts were slowly dripping downward. It was very noticeable. I did everything I could think of to get rid of it, adjusting screen resolution, display, restart the goddamn thing 4 times. The blood wouldn't go away. My laptop was cursed with Frylock's murderous guilt. But then a window popped up. It was the Windows Media Player. I knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant sight. I must have clicked the X 450 times. It wouldn't go away. Looking near the bottom of the window, the title said, "Oh my god." It scared the hell out of me. I clicked the timeline somewhere in the middle and hoped that I wouldn't see something that wouldn't fuck with my head. Anything would have done the job. It didn't work. Frylock appeared with the same menacing, insane look. This time, he was holding Carl upside down in the back of the house near the brick wall. The word Campbell spraying graffiti on the bricks. He had a piece of flesh hanging off his teeth. He was holding a scalping knife up to his stomach. Carl's face was the worst I have ever seen. He too had 2 bloodshot, bulging eyes looking ready to pop out. His jaw hung wide open, even though he was upside down. He was missing most of his teeth, and the ones that were there were grotesquely crooked. Blood ran out of his mouth and nose, down to his scalp, which was peeled like a banana. Frylock's face slowly grew into a smirk of twisted satisfaction as he brought the scalping knife to Carl's belly and began cutting. Guts were pouring out like a fountain. I couldn't take it anymore. I pressed Ctrl-Alt-Delete over and over and over again. Nothing worked. I ripped out the battery and threw my laptop behind the bed. Again, the sounds of excruciating pain and flesh ripping continued for 15 seconds. 15 seconds, which seemed like an eternity. The sound stopped, and I just laid down on my bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. I couldn't think of anything but the blood splattering. It was burned to my mind. My ceiling seemed to be thriving with exploded flesh and human entrails. I had a hard time trying to sleep, but somehow I did. I passed out around 8 AM. I then began to have nightmares about waking up with blood and flesh all over my face and smeared bowels in my hands. In one of them, a piece of intestine itched my nose, so I reached up to scratch it off, only to pie myself in the face with salty tasting gore. The blood burned my eyes. I panicked and ran to the bathroom, only to find that my face looked just like Frylock's. I screamed and woke myself up swaying in fear. I could never get the image out of my head. All I knew for sure was that I could never watch the show ever again. Well, with Aqua Teen Hunger Force finally ending, I've got to do something special to commemorate the show's finale. Wait, what's this? Well, it looks like the proper time to dish this out.